Before I begin my story, and I truly hope you'll listen to the end, I want you to know that what I'm about to share isn't just about betrayal, it's about finding a strength I thought I'd lost. My daughter, my only child, Clara, told everyone I had dementia to steal my money, but I wasn't as frail or as foolish as she believed. I recorded everything, and this is how I reclaimed not just my assets, but my very self. Let me know in the comments if you've ever faced a moment where you had to fight for who you are. Part 1. The scent of lavender and old books always filled my home, a scent Richard, my late husband, had adored. We built this house, not just with bricks and mortar, but with shared dreams and a love that had weathered 50 good years. After Richard passed, the silence was the loudest thing, a constant companion in rooms that once echoed with his laughter. I was 72, and though my heart ached with his absence, my mind, I knew, was as sharp as the gardening shears I still wielded with precision every spring. I'd spent a lifetime nurturing my roses, my marriage, and above all, my daughter, Clara. From the moment she was born, a tiny, demanding bundle, she was the sun around which my world revolved. I remembered scrimping and saving from my modest teaching salary, Richard working overtime at the factory, also Clara could have the best, ballet lessons she abandoned after a month, a pony I ended up mucking out, the private university tuition that stretched us thin, but filled us with pride when she finally graduated, albeit with a degree she never used. We paid for her lavish wedding to Mark, a man I never quite warmed to with his too quick smile, and eyes that seemed to assess the value of everything, including people. We even helped them with the down payment on their sprawling suburban house, the one they always said was an investment, though it seemed more like a stage for their increasingly materialistic life. Clara had always been particular. What I once saw as a spirited nature, in hindsight, perhaps held the seeds of entitlement. If she didn't get what she wanted, the air would chill, a subtle disapproval radiating from her that I, as her mother, would rush to dispel with whatever concession was required. It was a pattern, one I'd unknowingly helped weave over decades. After Richard was gone, Clara's visits became more frequent, at least for a while. Initially, I welcomed them, a balm to my loneliness. She'd fuss around the kitchen, making tea, her conversation light, if a little strained. But then, a subtle shift began. Her questions became more probing, less about my well-being and more about practicalities. "Mum, do you have all your finances in order? It must be so confusing for you now," she'd say, her voice dripping with a concern that didn't quite reach her eyes. She'd offer to help with my online banking, suggesting I write down my passwords, just in case. I'd politely decline, assuring her I was managing perfectly well. Richard had been meticulous, and he'd taught me to be the same. My pension was secure, the house was paid off, and we had a comfortable nest egg, nothing extravagant, but enough for me to live out my days in peace and dignity. It was this modest security, I would later realize, that had become the object of my daughter's careful, cold calculations. She started mentioning how old the house was, how much upkeep it required. "Wouldn't you be more comfortable in a nice, modern apartment, Mum?" Less to worry about, I'd just smile and change the subject, my hand instinctively going to the worn arm of Richard's favorite chair. This house wasn't just bricks and mortar, it was my life, my memories, my sanctuary. The idea of leaving it was unthinkable. But Clara, it seemed, was thinking about it a great deal. Her concern began to feel less like care and more like a gentle, persistent pressure, the kind water exerts before it finally breaches a dam. I tried to dismiss my unease, telling myself she was just worried, that grief was making me overly sensitive. How wrong I was. The lavender and old books still scented the air, but a new, chilling undercurrent was beginning to permeate the quiet sanctuary of my home. Part 2. The shift in Clara's demeanor was insidious at first, like a vine slowly tightening its grip. Her visits, though regular, began to carry an edge. The solicitousness became almost performative, her questions about my health increasingly pointed. "Mum, are you sure you're remembering to take your medication? You seemed a bit forgetful on the phone yesterday." I'd raise an eyebrow, my memory perfectly clear. "I am quite sure, dear." "Perhaps it was you who were distracted." She'd offer a tight little smile and change the subject, but the insinuation lingered. Then came the whispers, the things I wasn't meant to hear. I was in the garden, tending to Richard's prize-winning roses, when I overheard Clara speaking on her mobile phone near the open kitchen window. Her voice was low, conspiratorial. "No, Mark, she's completely oblivious, drifting more each day. We have to act soon, for her own good, of course. The doctor I spoke to, Dr. Alastair, said he's seen cases like this progress very rapidly." "Yes, power of attorney is the first step." My blood ran cold. Drifting. Oblivious. Power of attorney. My pruning shears clattered to the stone path, my hands suddenly nerveless. I leaned against the warm brick of the house, my heart hammering against my ribs. It was like being doused with icy water, a shocking, brutal awakening. For her own good. Or for her own greed. The pieces began to fall into place with horrifying clarity, her sudden interest in my finances, the subtle suggestions that I was losing my grip, the carefully planted seeds of doubt. This wasn't concern, it was a campaign. The full weight of the inciting incident, the true moment of irreversible betrayal, came a week later. My old friend, Margaret, called, her voice hesitant. "Elara, dear, I don't want to worry you, but I ran into Clara at the supermarket yesterday. She told me you've been diagnosed with early-onset dementia. She said you're having quite a difficult time." I sank into my armchair, the receiver cold against my ear. "She said what, Margaret?" My voice was barely a whisper. "Dementia," Margaret repeated, her own voice laced with confusion. She seemed very concerned, said you were forgetting things, getting agitated. She even mentioned she was looking into assistance for you. Assistance. A euphemism, I now understood, for stripping me of my independence, my home, my dignity. The pain was a physical blow, winding me, leaving me breathless. This wasn't just about money, it was about my identity, my sanity, the very essence of who I was. Clara, my daughter, the child I had loved and sacrificed for, was actively trying to erase me, painting me as incompetent, as a non-person, all to get her hands on what Richard and I had worked our lives for. The sheer audacity, the cold-blooded cruelty of it, was staggering. I felt a profound sense of desolation, a betrayal so deep it seemed to poison the very air I breathed. That night, sleep was impossible. I wandered through the silent house, Richard's photograph in my hand, tears streaming down my face. How could she? The daughter I taught to walk, to read, the one whose tears I'd dried, whose triumphs I'd celebrated more than my own. The hurt was a raw, gaping wound. Disbelief warred with a sickening certainty. The whispers I'd overheard, Margaret's call, it was all true. My own child was systematically dismantling my life, and she was doing it with a smile on her face and false concern in her voice. The foundation of my world, the trust one had placed in my only daughter, had crumbled into dust. Part 3. In the days that followed Margaret's call, the world seemed to tilt on its axis. Clara's campaign, I soon realized, was far more advanced and widespread than I could have imagined. It was like living in a nightmare where everyone else believed the distorted reality she was projecting. Old acquaintances would see me in the village shop and offer a sad, pitying smile. "How are you coping, Elara dear?" they'd ask, their eyes filled with a sorrow that was clearly for my supposed decline. Invitations to bridge club dried up. Even Mrs. Henderson from next door, who I'd shared countless cups of tea with over the garden fence, started speaking to me in that slow, overly enunciated way one uses for small children, or the very frail. Each encounter was a fresh stab of pain, a reminder of Clara's insidious work. She was isolating me, cutting me off from my support network, making me dependent on her. And she was doing it with such convincing, sorrowful earnestness that people believed her. They saw a devoted daughter struggling with her mother's tragic illness, not a predator circling her prey. Clara herself became more brazen. She'd pop in unannounced, often with her husband, Mark, in tow. Mark, who usually couldn't be bothered to visit, now looked around my home with an appraising eye, as if measuring for new curtains or, more likely, a for sale sign. Clara would rearrange things in my kitchen, to make them easier for you to find. Mum, she'd go through my mail, just to help you keep on top of things. One afternoon, she arrived with a sheaf of papers. Mum, this is just some paperwork for the bank. It'll allow me to help manage your accounts, pay your bills for you. You know, take some of the burden off. Her smile was saccharine, her eyes watchful. I looked at the documents, my hand trembling slightly, not from infirmity, but from a rising tide of fury. I don't need any help with my bills, Clara. I am perfectly capable. Her smile faltered. Oh, Mum, don't be difficult. We both know you've been struggling. The gaslighting was relentless. She'd question my recollection of events, subtly twist my words, making me feel like I was indeed losing my mind. There were moments, dark, terrifying moments, when a sliver of doubt would creep in. Was I imagining things? Was I truly becoming forgetful? But then I'd look at Richard's strong, kind face in the photograph, and a core of certainty would reassert itself. No. This was not me. This was Clara. The last straw moment, the one that shattered any remaining vestige of hope that this was some terrible misunderstanding, came on a Tuesday. The doorbell rang, and there stood Clara, beaming, with a woman I'd never seen before. Mum, this is Sandra, Clara announced brightly. Sandra is from Willow Creek Manor. I thought it would be nice for you to just have a look at their brochure, see what wonderful facilities they offer. They have lovely gardens and activities. Sandra, a woman with a professionally sympathetic smile and a folder full of glossy pictures of sterile-looking rooms, stepped inside before I could protest. Willow Creek Manor. It sounded like a prison sentence. I looked at Clara, her expression one of triumphant concern. She was actually trying to put me in a home. To ship me off, out of sight, out of mind, while she plundered my life. The audacity of it stole my breath. I felt a cold rage, a clarity so sharp it was almost painful. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about survival. My survival. The polite, accommodating Alara, the mother who had always yielded, began to recede, and in her place, something harder, something fiercely protective, began to stir. The walls were closing in, but I wasn't going to let them crush me. Part 4. The image of Sandra from Willow Creek Manor, with her glossy brochures and synthetic sympathy, burned in my mind. That was the precise moment the dam of my grief and confusion broke, and a torrent of cold, hard resolve surged through me. Clara wanted me gone, erased, declared incompetent. She thought I was a doddering old fool, an easy mark. She had underestimated me. Profoundly. That night, I didn't cry. I sat in Richard's armchair, the silence of the house no longer feeling empty, but charged with a new, steely purpose. If Clara was waging a war, then I would fight back. And I would fight smart. The idea of recording her came to me not in a flash of cinematic inspiration, but as a logical, almost inevitable step. Words were her weapon, whispers, lies, manipulations. I needed her own words to be her undoing. The next morning, I took the bus into town. I avoided the main street, paranoid that Clara might have eyes everywhere, friends she'd primed, shopkeepers she'd confided in. I went to a small electronics shop on a side street, the kind that sold everything from watch batteries to obscure gadgets. I felt a strange mixture of furtiveness and determination as I asked the young man behind the counter for a small, discreet voice recorder. He showed me a few options, and I chose one no bigger than my thumb, simple to operate. 4 lectures, I told him, offering a vague smile. Back home, I spent hours practicing with it, my old teacher's discipline coming to the fore. I learned how to turn it on and off silently, how to position it for the best sound quality. I experimented with placing it in my apron pocket, in a bowl of potpourri on the coffee table, tucked into the pages of a book. My house, my sanctuary, was about to become my fortress, and this tiny device, my secret weapon. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. Clara called, her voice oozing concern. "Mum, Mark and I were thinking of popping over this afternoon. Just to see how you are. And I wanted to discuss that lovely Willow Creek place a bit more. Sandra said you seemed quite interested. I had barely been able to contain my horror. "Oh, that would be nice, dear," I managed, keeping my voice deliberately vague, a little frail. Before she arrived, I activated the recorder and slipped it into the pocket of my cardigan. My heart was thumping, a nervous bird trapped in my chest. When Clara and Mark walked in, their expressions were a mixture of feigned solicitude and barely concealed impatience. Mark, as usual, hovered in the background, looking uncomfortable, while Clara launched into her well-rehearsed spiel. "Mum, we really need to be practical," she began, settling onto the sofa opposite me. "This big house is too much for you. And your memory, well, we both know it's not what it used to be." I made a show of looking confused. "My memory? I feel quite all right, dear." Clara exchanged a look with Mark, a sigh escaping her lips. "That's part of the problem, Mum. You don't realize. Last week, you forgot you'd already told me about Mrs. Henderson's cat 3 times, a blatant lie. I'd mentioned it once. Then came the words I'd been waiting for, the venom coated in sugar. Look, once we get the power of attorney sorted, and you're settled comfortably at Willow Creek, Mark and I can handle the sale of the house. You won't have to worry about a thing. We'll make sure your money is managed properly. It's a big responsibility, but we are willing to take it on for you." Mark nodded solemnly. "It's for the best, Elara. You deserve to be cared for." After they left, my hand trembled as I retrieved the recorder. I sat at the kitchen table, plugged in the small earphones, and pressed play. Hearing her voice, so calm, so reasonable, as she plotted to strip me of everything, was sickening. But beneath the disgust, a grim satisfaction bloomed. I had it. Clear, undeniable proof of her intentions, of her lies. This was just the beginning. My quiet life of lavender and old books had been irrevocably altered, but in its place, a new, unexpected strength was taking root. Clara thought she was writing my final chapter. She had no idea I was just beginning to write hers. Part 5. With that first recording secured, a quiet fire ignited within me. Each subsequent visit from Clara, each condescending remark, each attempt to manage my life, became an opportunity to gather more evidence. I became an actress in my own home, playing the part of the slightly confused, increasingly frail old woman she wanted me to be. It was a demeaning role, and some days it grated on my very soul, but the thought of her smug, triumphant face if she succeeded fueled my determination. The recorder became my constant companion. I'd capture Clara discussing my deterioration, with Mark in hushed tones, when they thought I was napping, their voices clear as day as they debated how quickly they could get me into Willow Creek and list the house. "The market's good right now," Mark once said, his voice greedy. "We could get a great price. Enough to clear our debts and maybe that little place in Spain Clara wants." Clara's contributions were often more personal, more cutting. "Honestly, Mark, she's becoming such a burden. She repeats herself constantly. And she's so stubborn about everything. It's like talking to a brick wall. This dementia thing, it's a blessing in disguise, really. For us, I mean a blessing in disguise. My own daughter." The words were like acid, burning into my memory, but I meticulously saved every file, labeling them by date and time. I started to see a pattern in her deceptions. She would exaggerate minor forgetfulness, invent incidents that never happened, and consistently portray me as incapable of managing my own affairs. She even started intercepting calls from my old friends, telling them I was having a bad day, or too confused to talk, further isolating me. I knew I couldn't fight this alone. The recordings were powerful, but I needed legal guidance. The thought of navigating the legal system was daunting, but the alternative, succumbing to Clara's plan, was unthinkable. I remembered Richard mentioning a lawyer his company had used, someone known for her integrity and sharp mind. Her name was Monica Bradley. I found her firm listed online, specializing in family law and estate planning, with a note about elder advocacy. It felt like a sign. Making the appointment was an act of defiance. I chose a day Clara was busy with one of her charity luncheons. The irony was not lost on me. I dressed carefully, not as the frail old woman Clara portrayed, but as Alara Thorne, a woman of sound mind and resolute purpose. Walking into Monica Bradley's office felt like stepping into a different world, one of order, professionalism, and, I hoped, justice. Monica was younger than I expected, perhaps in her late 40s, with kind, intelligent eyes and a firm handshake. I was nervous, my carefully prepared notes clutched in my hand, the small recorder feeling heavy in my handbag. "Mrs. Thorne," she said, her voice calm and reassuring. "Please, tell me what's brought you here." I took a deep breath and began, my voice trembling slightly at first, then gaining strength as I recounted Clara's actions, the whispers, the lies, the attempt to place me in a home, the pressure to sign over power of attorney. I watched Monica's expression change from professional attentiveness to barely concealed outrage. When I finally produced the recorder and explained its contents, her eyebrows shot up. "You recorded her?" she asked, a note of admiration in her voice. I nodded. I didn't know what else to do. She was telling everyone I had dementia. Monica leaned forward. "Mrs. Thorne, may I listen to some of these?" For the next hour, we sat in her quiet office, the sound of Clara's voice, and occasionally Mark's, filling the room. Monica listened intently, her expression growing grimmer with each damning revelation. When the last selected recording finished, there was a moment of silence. Then Monica looked at me, her eyes full of a steely resolve that mirrored my own. "Mrs. Thorne," she said, her voice firm, "what your daughter is doing is not just morally reprehensible, it's potentially illegal. This is exploitation. And based on what I've heard, and more importantly, based on my conversation with you today, her claims about your mental state are baseless. You are anything but incompetent." A wave of relief washed over me, so profound it almost brought tears to my eyes. To be heard, to be believed, after weeks of being gaslit and dismissed, was like a lifeline. "We are going to fight this, Alara," Monica said, using my first name, a gesture of solidarity that meant the world to me. "And we are going to win." For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I felt a flicker of hope, a genuine belief that I could reclaim my life from the shadows Clara had cast over it. Part 6. The alliance with Monica Bradley was the turning point I desperately needed. Her office became my war room, a sanctuary where strategy replaced despair. Monica was everything Clara was not: honest, empathetic, and fiercely intelligent. She listened patiently as I poured out every detail, every slight, every manipulative tactic Clara had employed. Her first, most crucial piece of advice was to obtain an independent, comprehensive neuropsychological evaluation. "We need irrefutable medical proof of your cognitive health, Elara," Monica explained. "Not from a doctor Clara may have influenced, but from a respected specialist of our choosing." She arranged an appointment with a Dr. Ramirez, renowned in his field. The assessment was thorough, lasting several hours, involving memory tests, problem-solving exercises, and in-depth conversation. It was rigorous, but I felt a sense of calm throughout. I had nothing to hide, my mind was my own. While awaiting the results, Monica and I worked on other fronts. She advised me to continue playing the role Clara expected, at least for a little longer. "The more comfortable she feels, the more likely she is to reveal her hand further, perhaps even make a mistake," Monica reasoned. It was a distasteful charade, feigning confusion, nodding vaguely when Clara spoke of simpler living arrangements. There were times I wanted to scream the truth at her, to confront her with her own vile words from the recordings. But I held back, clinging to Monica's counsel. Each interaction was a carefully calibrated performance. I continued to record everything. Clara, emboldened by my apparent passivity, grew more careless. She'd openly discuss her plans with Mark on speakerphone, assuming I couldn't follow the conversation. "Just a few more weeks, Mark, and we'll have her signature on everything. Then we can finally get on with our lives," she'd say, the greed palpable in her voice. She even brought up the Willow Creek brochures again, pressing me to pick a room layout. "Wouldn't this one with the garden view be lovely, Mum? Though perhaps a smaller one would be more manageable for you." Meanwhile, with Monica's guidance, I began to quietly secure my assets. We reviewed my will, making necessary amendments to ensure Clara would not benefit from her deceit. We contacted my bank, putting safeguards in place, changing passwords, and ensuring that no large transactions could be made without my explicit, in-person authorization, verified by Monica if necessary. We even explored setting up a trust, further protecting my home and savings from any future predatory attempts. Monica was meticulous, explaining every legal document, every step, ensuring I understood and was comfortable with the plan. She was more than just a lawyer, she became a confidant, a source of strength. She validated my feelings, assuring me that my anger and hurt were justified. "You are the victim here, Elara," she'd remind me gently when the emotional toll of the deception threatened to overwhelm me. "And you are incredibly brave for fighting back." The report from Dr. Ramirez arrived a few weeks later. Monica called me immediately. "Elara, the results are in," she said, her voice warm. "And they are, as I expected, excellent. Dr. Ramirez confirms you have superior cognitive function for your age group. There is absolutely no indication of dementia or any other cognitive impairment." I closed my eyes, a silent prayer of thanks on my lips. It was official, documented proof. Another piece of the puzzle fell into place. We now had the medical evidence to dismantle Clara's narrative completely. The meticulous planning continued. We decided on the timing for the confrontation, choosing a moment when Clara would feel most confident, most certain of her impending victory. Monica suggested a formal meeting at her office, under the guise of discussing the final arrangements for my care and financial management. It was a trap, baited with Clara's own greed. The thought of the impending confrontation filled me with a mixture of trepidation and a fierce, almost exhilarating anticipation. The days of passive endurance were numbered. Soon, Clara would face the truth, not just of my mental acuity, but of her own character. The stage was being set, not for my committal, but for her unmasking. Part 7. The day of the scheduled meeting dawned crisp and clear, a stark contrast to the storm brewing within me. Monica had sent a formal invitation to Clara and Mark, requesting their presence to discuss important matters regarding Mrs. Thorne's future welfare and estate management. The wording was deliberately ambiguous, designed to pique at Clara's interest and make her believe this was the culmination of her efforts, the moment she would finally gain control. I spent the morning in quiet reflection, walking through my garden, touching the velvet petals of Richard's roses. This garden, this house, they were extensions of me, filled with a lifetime of love and labor. The thought of Clara callously disposing of it all, of consigning me to some sterile room, while she and Mark squandered my legacy, solidified my resolve. There was no room for sentimentality where Clara was concerned anymore. She had forfeited that right. I chose my outfit carefully, a tailored navy blue dress, elegant and understated, the kind Richard always said made me look like a woman who knew her own mind. I wanted to project strength, not frailty. When Monica's driver arrived to pick me up, I felt a sense of calm I hadn't experienced in months. It was the calm of a soldier before a battle for which they are fully prepared. Monica greeted me at her office with a warm, reassuring smile. "Ready, Elara?" she asked. I nodded. As I'll ever be, we sat in the comfortable chairs in her meeting room, the same room where I had first poured out my story, where I had first felt a glimmer of hope. On the polished mahogany table lay a discreetly placed file, Dr. Ramirez's report and a small, almost invisible digital audio player, cued and ready. Clara and Mark arrived precisely on time, a testament to their eagerness. Clara was dressed in a smart business suit, a briefcase in her hand, looking every inch the capable daughter taking charge. There was a certain smugness about her, a barely suppressed air of triumph. Mark, as usual, looked slightly ill at ease, but followed her lead. "Mum," Clara said, her voice professionally compassionate, as she leaned down to kiss my cheek, a kiss that felt like ice. "So glad you're feeling up to this. And Monica, thank you for arranging everything." She took her seat opposite me, Mark beside her, and opened her briefcase, pulling out a sheaf of papers. "Now," she began, her tone brisk and businesslike, "Mark and I have been looking over the figures, and given Mum's condition, we think the best course of action is for me to assume full power of attorney immediately. It just simplifies everything. I've got the documents here for Mum to sign." She pushed a pen and a thick document across the table towards me. "We've also identified a lovely room for you at Willow Creek, Mum. South-facing, just as you like. We can start the moving process next week." She smiled, a predator's smile, convinced the prey was finally cornered. I looked at the papers, then at Clara, my expression carefully neutral. Monica observed them, her face unreadable, letting Clara lay out her entire plan. Clara spoke for several minutes, detailing her concerns, her sacrifices, and the necessity of her taking control for my own good. She painted a picture of a devoted daughter stepping in to manage the affairs of a rapidly declining mother. It was a masterful performance of deceit, and for a horrifying moment, I saw how easily others had been fooled. She spoke of selling the house to free up capital for your ongoing care, of investing my savings more prudently. It was all there, the entire scheme, laid out with chilling efficiency. When she finally finished, she looked at me expectantly, waiting for my signature, for my final capitulation. The silence in the room stretched, taut and heavy. This was it. The moment the tables would turn. Part 8. Clara's confident smile remained fixed, waiting for my compliance, for the pen to move across the paper she'd so carefully prepared. I let the silence hang for another beat, watching the flicker of impatience in her eyes. Then, I slowly pushed the documents back across the table. "No, Clara," I said, my voice quiet but firm, resonating with a strength that surprised even myself. I won't be signing anything, Clara's smile faltered, replaced by a look of mild irritation. Mum, don't be difficult. We've been through this. It's for the best. Mark shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Elara, Clara's just trying to help. It was Monica who spoke next, her voice cutting through the tension, calm and authoritative. Actually, Mr. and Mrs. Sterling, she said, addressing Clara and Mark, there seems to be a significant misunderstanding regarding Mrs. Thorne's current health and her capacity to manage her own affairs. She picked up the file from the table. This is a comprehensive neuropsychological report prepared by Dr. Eduardo Ramirez, a leading specialist in his field. I believe you mentioned a Dr. Alastair, Clara. Perhaps his assessment was less thorough. Monica opened the file. Dr. Ramirez's findings are unequivocal. Mrs. Thorne exhibits superior cognitive function, with no evidence whatsoever of dementia or any cognitive impairment that would preclude her from managing her personal or financial affairs. In fact, he notes her insight and reasoning abilities are exceptionally sharp. Clara stared, her face paling slightly. That's impossible. That doctor doesn't know her. I see her every day. She's confused, she forgets things. Does she, Clara? Monica's voice was like steel. Or is that the narrative you've been carefully constructing? And then, Monica reached for the small audio player. Perhaps we should listen to some other perspectives on the matter. From someone who knows the situation intimately. She pressed a button. Clara's voice filled the room, clear and unmistakable. The first recording was from her conversation with Mark about selling the house quickly. The market's good right now, Mark. We could get a great price. Enough to clear our debts and maybe that little place in Spain Clara wants. Clara's jaw dropped. Mark looked horrified, his eyes darting from the player to Clara to me. Monica didn't stop there. She played another snippet, Clara discussing my supposed burden. Honestly, Mark, she's becoming such a burden. This dementia thing, it's a blessing in disguise, really. For us, I mean. And then, the damning conversation about getting me into Willow Creek and securing power of attorney. Once we get the power of attorney sorted, and you're settled comfortably at Willow Creek, Mark and I can handle the sale of the house. You won't have to worry about a thing. With each recording, Clara shrank further into her chair, her face transforming from shock to disbelief, then to a dawning, sickening horror. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving her looking haggard and old. Mark was ashen, staring at his wife, as if seeing her for the first time. When the last recording ended, the silence in the room was absolute, heavy with the weight of exposed deceit. It was my turn to speak. I looked directly at Clara, my daughter, the woman who had plotted to strip me of everything. There was no rage in my voice, only a profound, sorrowful clarity. You didn't just want my money, Clara, I said, my voice steady. You wanted to erase me. You wanted to silence me, to declare me unfit, irrelevant. You told the world I was losing my mind, while all along it was your own moral compass that had shattered. All those years of sacrifice, of love, was this what it was all for? So you could feel entitled to what wasn't yours? Clara opened her mouth, but no words came out. A choked sob escaped her instead. Her carefully constructed facade had crumbled, revealing the ugly truth beneath. The powerful, confident daughter was gone, replaced by a guilty, terrified woman, exposed and utterly defeated. The vindication was not triumphant or loud, it was a quiet, profound settling of accounts, a restoration of truth in the face of calculated lies. Part 9. The immediate aftermath in Monica's office was a tableau of devastation. Clara's devastation. She sat slumped in her chair, tears streaming down her face, making no attempt to wipe them away. The carefully curated image of the competent, caring daughter had shattered into a million pieces, leaving only the raw, ugly truth of her greed and deceit. Mark looked utterly shell-shocked, his gaze fixed on some distant point, as if unable to process the magnitude of his wife's betrayal, or perhaps his own complicity. Monica, ever the professional, allowed a moment for the impact to settle before she spoke, her tone devoid of malice, but firm with the weight of legal consequence. "Clara," she began, "what you have attempted here constitutes elder financial exploitation, and potentially fraud and defamation. The evidence is clear and compelling." She paused, letting the words sink in. "Mrs. Thorne has every right to pursue legal charges. At the very least, you can expect to be completely and irrevocably excluded from her life and her estate." Clara finally found her voice, a desperate, broken whisper. "Mum, I'm so sorry. I didn't. I mean, things got out of hand." She looked at me, her eyes pleading, but her apology felt hollow, born of desperation rather than genuine remorse. "It got out of hand, Clara," I responded, my voice still quiet but unyielding. "You systematically tried to destroy my reputation, my independence, and my peace of mind. You plotted to take my home, my savings. That's not something that gets out of hand, that's a calculated, cruel campaign." Mark finally spoke, his voice hoarse. "Elara, we never meant. I mean, Clara was just worried about you, Anne." "Worried?" I cut him off, my patience wearing thin. "Worried I wouldn't die soon enough, so you could get your hands on my money. Worried I was still of sound mind and therefore an obstacle to your plans. Save your excuses, Mark. I heard your voice on those recordings too. You were a willing participant." He flushed and fell silent. Monica then laid out the terms. I was not, at that moment, inclined to press criminal charges, though the option remained open. My primary goal was to secure my peace and my assets. Clara would sign a legally binding agreement, drafted by Monica, acknowledging her actions, waiving any and all current or future claims on my estate or person, and agreeing to have no contact with me whatsoever unless initiated by me through Monica. She would also be required to write letters of retraction and apology to specific individuals she had lied to about my condition, the content of which would be approved by Monica and myself. If she refused, or violated any terms, Monica made it clear that all legal options, including prosecution and a civil suit for damages, would be pursued vigorously. Clara, broken and defeated, nodded numbly, signing the documents Monica presented with a trembling hand. There were no more arguments, no more manipulations, just the stark reality of her downfall. Leaving Monica's office that day, I felt a lightness I hadn't experienced in months. It wasn't elation, not exactly, but a profound sense of relief, of a heavy burden lifted. Justice had been served, not through vengeance, but through truth. In the weeks that followed, the news of Clara's deceit rippled through our small community. The letters of apology, carefully vetted by Monica, did little to stem the tide of shock and disapproval directed at Clara. Friends who had been taken in by her lies called me, some in tears, to offer their apologies and support. Mrs. Henderson from next door brought over a freshly baked apple pie, her eyes full of remorse. "Oh, Elara, I feel so foolish, so awful for believing her. Can you ever forgive me?" I assured her, and others, that I understood. Clara had been very convincing. The house began to feel like my own again. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, replaced by the familiar scent of lavender and old books, now untainted by suspicion and fear. I slept soundly for the first time in what felt like an eternity. The emotional toll had been immense, leaving scars that I knew would take time to fade, but beneath the pain, there was a growing sense of empowerment. I had faced the ultimate betrayal from my own child and had not only survived, but had emerged stronger, with my dignity intact. The battle was over, and I had won. Part 10. Months have now turned into a little over a year since that fateful day in Monica's office. Life has settled into a new rhythm, a peaceful cadence that I cherish more than words can say. The house is quiet, but it's a comforting quiet now, filled with my own choices, my own routines. Richard's roses bloomed magnificently this past summer, as if celebrating my reclaimed freedom. I often sit in the garden, a cup of tea in hand, and reflect on the storm I weathered. There's a touch of melancholy, of course. Clara is, after all, my daughter. The bond, once so precious, is irrevocably broken, and that's a grief I carry quietly. But it's a grief overlaid with an immense sense of peace and restored dignity. What became of Clara and Mark? From what I hear indirectly, I've had no direct contact. As per our agreement, their lives unraveled quite spectacularly. The social ostracism was immediate and brutal. Their carefully constructed image was shattered. Friends distanced themselves, and Mark's business, which relied heavily on local reputation, suffered significantly. They eventually sold their oversized house, the one they were so keen to supplement with my assets, and moved away. I don't know where, and frankly, I don't wish to. Their comeuppance was a direct consequence of their own actions, a classic case of poetic justice. My focus, however, has been on my own new beginning. With Clara out of my life, I reconnected with genuine friends, the ones whose loyalty had wavered under Clara's influence, but who were quick to offer sincere apologies and renewed companionship. Bridge Club is back on the agenda, and I've even taken up watercolor painting, something I always wanted to try but never found the time for. My little paintings of the garden aren't masterpieces, but they bring me joy. Monica remains a good friend and trusted advisor. She encouraged me to update my will, and I've decided to leave my home and a significant portion of my savings to a local charity that supports victims of elder abuse. It feels right, turning my painful experience into something positive for others. The recordings, once my secret weapon, are now locked away. I don't need to listen to them anymore. The truth they revealed set me free. I learned that vulnerability doesn't mean weakness, and that even in the autumn of one's life, there can be reserves of strength and resilience one never knew existed. I underestimated myself for a time, almost succumbing to the narrative Clara tried to impose. But I also underestimated the power of truth and the kindness of strangers like Monica, and even the young man in the electronics shop who sold me that little recorder without a second glance. This experience taught me that while betrayal from family can cut the deepest, the fight for oneself, for one's dignity, is always worth it. I am no longer just a Lara Thorne, the grieving widow, or a Lara Thorne, the mother of a deceitful daughter. I am a Lara Thorne, a survivor, a woman who found her voice and her strength when it mattered most. My home is once again my sanctuary, filled not with the ghosts of what was lost, but with the quiet, determined joy of a life reclaimed. And that, I've discovered, is the sweetest vindication of all. Thank you for listening to my story. Please, always trust your instincts, and never let anyone try to diminish who you are. Hit that subscribe button if you'd like to hear more stories of resilience and everyday courage.